Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you for joining us for another conversation on an important topic and in a fun, meaningful way. Let's take a moment and think about what is Goldilocks reminding us. She is reminding us that we each inherently have the ability to come from a place of centeredness when we are young. We're born with that innate ability. She knows how to make sure whatever she's eating or drinking is not too hot or not too cold. She knows wherever she sits, wherever she lays down to take a nap, is not too hard or not too soft. The social conditioning and pressures around us make us forget it. So we give up what nature gave us, what God blessed us with, and we learn all these bad behaviors, and then we go through therapy and all these other things to unlearn all that we have learned to get back to how we were brought into this world. So today we're going to take a page from Goldilocks and talk about what does it mean to be in a workplace with people who came of age pre-COVID, of multiple generations, and the generation that came of age during COVID, and how they approach life and work differently. And to have this conversation with me, you're going to absolutely love this young woman, Isabelle Jean. Isabel, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks. I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Isabel. So I know you finished college, your undergraduate degree, in the middle of COVID. So you're one of those young people who never got to do the traditional graduation, celebrate your coming of age. And then you also went into the work world during COVID. How did that feel for you, and how has that shaped you?
Yeah. So rewinding a little bit, my sophomore year in college, I went to undergrad at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. My sophomore year, I spent at La Universidad de Nebrija in Madrid, Spain. And I spent a year there, and it was an amazing time. I really loved Spain and the people, and I don't know, my background, being Haitian American, a child of an immigrant, I have this something embedded in me to travel and to learn about cultures and to explore and just really be a student around the world. I want to travel. I want to learn different things about different people and different cultures and just take in as much knowledge as I can. And so I spent a year in Spain, and then I came back, and March of 2020, my junior year, the whole world went into quarantine. And so I had this year of so much enrichment and so much knowledge and understanding and empathy for everyone, and to just be shut in was a lot for me, and I'm sure a lot for everyone else. But it was such a drastic extreme in my situation that it was just a lot. And so I spent my last 2 years of college in we used to call it Zoom University, that we were just, I don't know, doing all of our classes online. Most of the time we had our cameras off. We weren't really participating. We weren't, I don't know, it depended on the class, obviously, but for the most part, cameras were off. We were doing our own thing, making coffee, making breakfast while class was going on. And it was just not a very collaborative environment. It was really hard to to feel like any of it was real. I think that a lot of people felt a lot of derealization at that point, me included. And I know that my roommate and my friends at that time were definitely not feeling like, I don't know, actively engaged in life at all. It all felt a little fake, and we were all adjusting to quarantine, and there's also all of this grief and death and everything going around because of COVID. And it was just a lot to go through. And so flash forward, I think a couple months into 2020, I think it was 2020, late 2020, that I joined an IT organization. It's an IT consulting firm. And I came on for marketing support. My degree is in communication, and I have another in Spanish. So I was just, I don't know, I always saw myself in the nonprofit world. I took this internship and I was like, okay, let's see, I can help, whatever. I don't really want to be in the consulting world. I want to be in nonprofit, but I saw that my skills were needed. I believed in the mission. I believed in the vision of the people, and I took the opportunity. And so I joined a fully remote consulting firm and put my skills to work, and honestly fell in love with the work that I was doing, the opportunities that I had here. I'm still with Tech Fives to this day and enjoying it. But early on, I just did not see my place in it. And I think that those feelings stemmed from not having a place. I graduated college not feeling like anything was real, not feeling in touch with anything, not feeling connected to any type of community. We were all on Zoom. What type of community was there? And so to transition into this completely remote workplace was just a complete, I don't know, it was different than anything that anyone could have prepared me for. At that point, it was new to everyone. And so we were all just figuring it out. And I know a lot of places started to transition into a virtual world pre-COVID, but it was definitely an adjustment for everyone. So yeah, I think my feelings in it were, at the time, it was just all very much transition, adjustment, and uncertainty at that point. And I think that those feelings of uncertainty are normal at that point. I think 20 years old. So that I think that it is understandable and relatable to a lot of different generations, but to the generation going through that, like entering the workforce during COVID or finishing school. And even I'm talking to my younger cousins and hearing them going through like prepubescent, like almost teenagers, entering their high school and figuring out what social dynamics are and the rules of social norms and everything like that during COVID, when you're isolated for so long. It's just, we're dealing with something completely new in so many different generations. And we need to I guess really hold a lot of space and grace for everyone, because we are all trying to figure out what all went on just almost 5 years ago at this point.
Very true, very true. And it's interesting you talk about the isolation and the inability to engage. I grew up in the middle of a genocidal war, so there was no COVID, but we still couldn't socialize, right? So to this day, there are certain things I have never done in life, because once that stage of your life is gone, it's gone. You don't go back in your 40s and 50s and try to recapture that, then you look like a crazy person, right? So I totally hear you. And we're also in a world where the people who have been there, older generations, look at the world from a perspective of physically being present together and doing things together. And now your generation understands that we don't need to be together to build a sense of belonging. We can still build it and we can still function. What are some of the generational divides or differences you are seeing? And what advice would you have for the older generation that is wired a little different?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just in the way that we form communities, it's completely different. I think that my generation, I'm Gen Z, I'm 25 at this point. I think that it is very common for us to make friends on the internet. I mean, even in high school, I had friends that were making friends through Twitter and through Instagram and Tumblr and different social media apps at that point. And people are still doing that to this day. So I think that my generation, having grown up for the most part with technology and with social media being so accessible, it's so common to be able to adjust and rely on internet communities. So I think that this adjustment to remote work, I think that that is, I think, a bit easier to adjust to. But at the same time, I think that social media adds to somewhat of like parasocial relationships that we have. It's not necessarily a true community the way that humans need social interactions. So I think that one of the pieces of advice that I would give to an older generation is to just be open to learning. I think that, and be open to adapting, evolving with the younger generation. I think that seeing us being so, whether it's quick to adapt or hard to assimilate into what was left for us, I think that that is something that is just changing with time, and we are all figuring it out. I think that we're all new to this. We're all going through this life for the first time. And so I think that just, again, holding space, being graceful with each other, holding compassion for each other, knowing that we are all figuring it out. And I don't know, I think that as you and I talk about this all the time, but to come from a place of curiosity, if something is not working, if there feels like there's some type of clash, I think that it's important to ask with curiosity rather than to immediately jump to judgment or to defensiveness or whatever that might be, to make sure that we are truly holding space for each other and understanding that everyone is doing their best and trying their hardest to make it through.
Absolutely. And it's true. Nobody wakes up every morning and says, I'm going to make everybody else's life a living hell, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be that person, but everybody is coming from their frame of reference and what they're comfortable with. And you mentioned your dad, you're a child of immigrants. So you know some of the challenges immigrants go through. I'm an immigrant myself. So we have to adjust and adapt to the world here. And much is expected of us, right? If you're a woman, you have to show up a different way. If you're an immigrant and an immigrant woman or a immigrant man, you have to do so much more to be recognized, to even be at the table. And when so much is asked of us, something else has to give, right? So a lot of times children are also learning from how they're seeing their parents navigate life and how the world is treating them as they're making all those sacrifices. Talk a little bit about what was that lesson for you? And from that lesson, how do you extrapolate the younger generation now taking the stance that, you know what, my self-care is important, my yoga is important. I am going to go do my yoga and then come to work, and my meetings cannot start before 9 o'clock. And
Yeah.
employees are having to adjust. And blaming the younger generation is not the answer because they are a product of what they witnessed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that this is all very interesting to feel this shift in the workplace and the balance between life and work, or work and play. I think that with me being in a startup, with me being in a completely remote work environment, I have such a privilege to be able to really lead by example and push that. And although I am one of the youngest in my organization, I am definitely very strong and proud in my this is my work time and this is when I'm completely offline. I am unreachable. And I think that it's really important to have those boundaries. I think that I don't know, with the accessibility of therapy and the importance of understanding yourself. And I don't know, there has been a push of boundaries, the push of making room for your own self, holding space for yourself. It's not just other people that need to hold space for you. You also have to do that for yourself. And so with the workplace, you have to find that work-life balance. So yeah, I think, especially as a child of an immigrant, I saw how many sacrifices my dad made for me, and even my mom as an American. I've seen the sacrifices that both of them have made. And as much as I appreciate that, I am not willing to lose myself in order to give to the capitalistic system that we have currently in the US. And I think that we can find balance. I think that true capitalism, it's to benefit and empower and uplift everyone, not just to make profit over the people that are helping you make that profit. And so I think that there are a lot of things that go into that. And I think that losing yourself is not one of the things that needs to go into that. So as much as I appreciate all of the sacrifice that was made to get me to this place, I think that a lot of people in my generation can relate to this and resonate with what I'm saying, and that it's simply not worth losing yourself. It's not worth the amount of I don't know, the crater that you're digging in yourself for the purpose of your company or a retirement fund, or I don't know, so many different things. And you can see it. There are so many news articles about millennials and Gen Z not having savings account, not having retirement funds, different things like that. We just don't see the I don't know. I think it's partially that derealization, partially the climate crisis that's happening, partially a whole bunch of things. But I think that it's just, we are focusing on the now. We're focusing on the community that we have. We're trying to uplift each other currently. And that is already a lot. So we're not trying to sacrifice our own sense of self, our own being, to keep the wheels turning on whatever machine that society is prioritizing or has prioritized in the past.
So two things resonate for me, Isabel, based on what you're saying. One is losing oneself in service to another's pursuit is giving up your life because somebody else's life or their dream is more important, right? So that is an important nugget for everybody to tuck away, because this is true in marriages too. A lot of people midway through marriage realize, you know what, I've lost a sense of who I am in pursuit of the other person. And anytime one person has to lose themselves for the sake of another, that is not a healthy relationship, right? Whether it's societal, family, or work. And the other that resonated for me, Isabel, is the fact that the need to live in the present, because life happens in the present. Focusing on what has been is never going to change what's coming ahead. And worrying about what's coming ahead, we are going to miss taking the steps today to be prepared for tomorrow. So living in the moment is the only way to live. And so I'm happy to hear you from this generation talk about the two most important things that are self-affirming. I cannot lose myself in pursuit of somebody else, and I cannot stop living in the moment and stop living because somebody wants me to focus on the future or the past. How does that play with the intergenerational workplace and society when you talk like this? And what are some of the pushbacks you're getting?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I definitely have felt the pushback, and I have heard it from other people my age, whether it's friends or just videos online. And definitely, I understand that pushback is there. I have seen some, well, let me start with the pushback. So the pushback is typically that we are not as giving to whatever central cause that we're all trying to get, whether, and I think that central cause is what we are feeling a little bit of disconnect intergenerationally with. I think that the cause that my generation is wanting to work towards is just, I don't know, more so, I guess, pushing back from that individualist society that the US really works so hard to keep up with. And so we're looking into more community and engagement with and connection with the people around us, making sure that we know our neighbors, making sure that we are giving back and I don't know, working with grassroots organizations and not necessarily funding these giant corporations, going to local coffee shops and local bookstores, making sure we have our library cards and different things like that, making sure we're funding and participating in local efforts. I think that that's one of the things that we are really, I think that the pendulum is just swinging towards that again. It's definitely cyclical. We're not the first to do this. We're just swinging back into that. But I think for, like, in regards to the workforce, I think that a lot of the times past generations have been so committed to their organization or whatever cause that is. I'm not exactly even sure, but it's definitely I think it's in search of stability from what I have heard from the conversations I have with my elders. I think that it is, and I hate that I just used that word elders. I feel like I feel like it's a slight or something. But the conversations that I've had, it typically stems from wanting stability, especially with being a child of an immigrant. You are in my dad's situation, he was wanting to create this beautiful, stable life for his family. And I would say he was incredibly successful at doing that, but at what cost? And so I think that's where the pushback comes from, that for people of my dad's generation, there's no cost too great to make sure that there is a stable life for his family and for his greater good. But in my generation, I think that pushback is more so, well, I'm not going to have kids if that's going to cost me my entire sense of self. Well, then I just won't do this. I won't do this. I'll sacrifice before I have to get to that point. And so I think that it's interesting where that pendulum is and how we are both generations pushing back on each other to see exactly what's the best case scenario to function as a society. But yeah, I don't know exactly what the answer is to that. But definitely the pushback is there. And I think that this is another topic that, Kaz, you and I talk about all the time, but you just have to show up authentically. If this is what I believe is good to me, I think then I need to be sure in my mission, sure in myself, that if my day starts and ends at 9 to 5 for the workplace, then I am going to everyone is going to respect that I will be doing yoga at 8 in the morning. I will be out of here by 5, and you will not call me for my lunch break and different things like that. I think that there's like a lot of pushback with the strictness of those different boundaries that we have in my generation. But I think that it's just, I don't know, it's just a change. I'm thinking part of me is just like, well, this is where we're at, deal with it. So,
And that's reality, right?
no.
The reality is that we all come from where we come from. But if everybody says, I won't budge, then that's not functional for the social fabric. If everybody says, this is where I am, and now let's figure out how do we waltz so that we give a little, we'll take a little, but nobody is giving everything and the other is taking everything. And to me, that is where most people miss the opportunity. Setting the boundaries are good. Setting the boundaries are necessary. But then what happens thereafter? I mean,
Yeah.
you have a cat there. I can see a cat behind you. Maybe your friend has a dog and the cat and the dog can look at each other and say, we don't like each other. But if you're, human parents are going to be friends, then the cat and dog has to figure out a way. to harmonize, not give up. Cat can't become a dog can't become a cat, but they have to figure out a way to harmonize, right? And so that's where the trick is, and that's where that human capability to bridge the divide comes into play. And to me, that is where the magic can happen too, because
Yeah.
generational divide is artificial. Our humanness is common. And if we can get past those, we are going to be great. So before we open this up for a live audience conversation, Isabel, is there any nugget of wisdom you want to share along this topic in a brief sentence or two? And then how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that just continuing on what you just said, we need to meet each other where we are. Again, going back to what I said in the beginning, that we need to hold more grace, hold more space for each other, be more compassionate, to just come with curiosity, understand each other, and be empathetic. I think a more empathetic world will definitely be for the better. So I think that that's what I would really lean into. Other than that, I think that yeah, we just need to be kinder, be a kinder world, and be graceful. So yeah, as for reaching out to me, I will make sure that Dr. Kaz has all of my LinkedIn information, a working link for everyone. And yeah, I think that that's probably the best place to meet me.
Thank you, Isabel. Hey, Joe, good to see you. I know you cannot wait to pose your questions, so go ahead. I'm excited to hear what you have to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also a child of an immigrant and I'm a millennial. So I kind of we have a few differences like generationally. And one of the things that I really resonate with that I want a little bit more insight with is kind of receiving that pushback with standing with your boundaries. Like, what does that kind of look like, and what communication do you use with things like that, with the boundaries of time, to do yoga or to do anything like that, or maybe some boundaries with your cat or your pets?
Yeah, I think that it's just being firm in your boundaries, making sure that those boundaries are respected, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm not doing the work that I'm asked to be doing. I'm making sure that my work is getting done, and I am having that boundary. So I am not going to work into the middle of the night, but at the same time, the work that is needed to be done is going to be done. And I think that just making sure that that balance is met is the key to that. But firm communication, and I know on a just with gender, I think that a lot of firm communication from women comes off as a lot of people see it as bitchiness when it's really just being assertive. And I think that working regardless of, or speaking regardless of those stereotypes that might be placed on us. I mean, even as a Black woman myself, I could be put into the role of being a bitchy woman, or I could be an angry Black woman, or I could be XYZ number of stereotypes because I am standing up for myself. But I think that if it is a matter of my boundaries, my priorities in life, then I'm going to be firm, and people can believe what they want to believe. And I will continue to smile and be my joyful self. And I think that I'll be even more joyful if I do some more yoga. So just kind of making sure that I am firm in my boundaries and prioritizing exactly what I need to prioritize while balancing that with the work that I need to be done.
Thank you for that answer, Isabel. It's very insightful. I do have one other question. You said that you graduated around the time of COVID and then you started immediately remote work. So I know that there's a few articles kind of going over the cons of remote working, and maybe we kind of talked a little bit about the possible disconnection. But do you feel like there's any other cons, or do you do anything to kind of combat those kinds of possible disconnections that you would have in a like in-person workplace?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there's a big gap in the story that I left out. Uh, as much as remote work is sometimes isolating, especially in my early 20s. It's hard to make friends as an adult. You have to really put yourself out there. But as hard as it is to be remote in the workplace, it's also an incredible privilege. While I was right after, I guess not right after graduation, about a year and a half or 2 years after graduation, I left. I earlier in this call or conversation, I said that I have a travel bug embedded in me from a very young age from my parents. And as soon as the pandemic lightened up enough to safely travel, I went back to that, and I continued to work. I continued to get everything done and be get everything done and beyond. I think that I did a pretty good job. I will say so myself. But I traveled. I left for Peru. I went to Chile, Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. I was out in each country for a few months at a time. I stayed away from the US for a whole year. And I just kind of, again, went back to what I love most is learning about other cultures. I continued practicing my Spanish. Was fluent at the time. I have lost a little bit of that being back in the US, but yeah, I think that as much as remote work is so negatively viewed, I think that it also opens us up to understanding a lot more about other people and being able to take time, whether it's just to go grocery shopping in the middle of the day and take care of yourself, or to go live elsewhere and to, I don't know, whether you could go see the national parks or like I did, go live in different Latin American countries or European countries or wherever you want to go. You can do a lot more with this concept of remote work. So I think that was one of the main ways that I took advantage of the privilege of remote work. And I will be out of the US shortly, hopefully. So definitely taking a leap on that remote work and the flexibility that it offers.
Joe, amazing
Amazing.
questions. Love the questions you asked. And what you are talking about, Isabel, is precisely where we need to go, right? If one aspect of life transforms, then there is another aspect to draw from. And how are we creating a sense of belonging? How are we connecting to the world around us? And how are we living a life as humans the way humans were intended to live? Humans were never intended to live in isolation. Even if work is remote, there are other ways for us to connect with that humanity around us. And there is nothing more joyful and opens up a learning moment than travel.
Yeah, and connection.
Broadens our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Isabel, for having this conversation. I know that this is not an easy conversation or an easy place to be in the workplace, in an intergenerational workplace, but it is a necessary push and pull, a necessary scenario we all have to grapple. To me, I imagine a waltz, right? It takes everybody to move a little and give space for a little. And then also keeping in mind emergencies happen and our boundaries have to come down when something like a 9/11 happens, or the business is in the middle of a huge investment drive and investors want some documents and we have to stay overnight and get things done. Those are the anomalies. But the anomaly cannot become the norm, and life has to have space to happen. And that is what the younger generation is asking for. So as I bring this to a close, with great gratitude to you, Isabel and Joe, for bringing the millennial and Gen Z perspective. I am a Gen Xer, but not a Gen Xer from the United States. So I grew up with a different paradigm. But nonetheless, how do we make this work intergenerationally in a world where not just gender, age is fluid, so is gender, so is culture, so is norms? When everything is fluid, how do we swim and how do we make sure we're all swimming in a way that we're not getting in each other's way, but we're flowing. And to me, that is where the trick is. And to our audience out there, take a moment and do an introspection of where you are and how are you showing up and how are you holding space for others and what can you do differently in a intergenerational, intergender, interprofessional environment with intercultural dynamics. How do we make it work and how do we make it joyful for us and those around us? Because otherwise, God help us, life is going to be miserable and we are responsible for making it so. So let's take a page from Goldilocks and figure out a way to get it just right.